You wanted me to talk about the necrotic vessels I touched on in the interview with Legion and Lilith. Well, they are protective conduits, and they've served me well for many years. So we're going to start with like something simple. How I started off was the Blight Barrier relic, which it describes how to make in within profane seals. I wanted to talk about my experiments, about one of the many factors and that contributed to my healing and protections I've consistently used over the years since 2013. So you hear my enemy trying to use me thanking Eric for giving me the tools and opening the door. But this is not a contradiction. No ritual is a one and done ritual. It requires constant work. There are many different forms of death essence that can be, let's say, changed or altered for various purposes, such as necromantic surgery. So it's possible to become one with the Karaktian energy flow, to become resistant to certain forms of disease. Now, right now, you're thinking that's quite the claim, like I was when I first read this in the grimoire. But actually, it takes quite a bit of consistency with these conduits it's with itself to achieve mastery over them. Like it's stated, to add personal parts of the self, like things like hair, nails, blood. I did this for the first time and felt the results, but there were my own spirits, my own loa, showing me how to make the effects stronger. I added this to my ritual regimen every couple of months. I would make a form of biodegradable necrotic conduit. I've seen quite a few people attempt to use spell bottles, but this is only trapping the energy. Remember, it's supposed to rot and decompose and disperse magic itself into Etheris, because this is the place you currently walk and exist. It's also necromancy. There is an alchemy to adhere to in allowing this conduit to decompose. That said, and explained, one of the things it doesn't directly mention is that you can target parts of your body by writing your intent on its seal or vessel. When I started working with my blood, for example, I would call forth and petition and inscribe the names of Matragal, Midden. Each entity I've worked who has worked extensively with working with blood. I added specifically chosen aligned herbs as well as certain formulas that are known to boost my immune system and help with the blood, and several stones and seals I had gotten etched into those stones as well for the purpose of this health experiment, and it was an absolute success. I then wanted to know how far I could take this. I began using these every other month, and I would change it to affect something different. So I was then once again led to add things to them by Mirren, Matragal, and Zazazel. They led me to craft necrotic traps within each vessel for when someone attacked a specific part of my body. Not only would it rebound, it would get transfigured and filtered and consistently sap the energy from the sender. Through the aspect of permanency, this effect stays. My train of thought was it isn't enough to defend yourself. There needs to be direct consequences for someone working against you spiritually. So every protection I've used over the years has sacrificial spells woven into them from my ancestry. I wanted this completely, overpowered, an offensive defense part of my arsenal. I had been doing this for such a long time because I had eventually knew I'd be in the public eye. And inevitably, when you're in the public eye, you always have, randoms either attempting to attack and test you just to see if it works or if you notice. But if you're a productive black magician, You don't have the time to constantly deal with either the mentally unstable or just weak individuals who want attention and social validation. So what this was only my frontline defense. You can actually use these methods from the original formula to correct different things to push them back. So my method led me down making something similar to that of Egyptian canophic jars for my own organs, each bound and buried with trusted dead, family and my own lineage. So we place our pieces in jars and bind them in the hands of our deceased relatives. With Lord Zazazel, I was able to refine this technique with methods of my own lineage over the years. I would always take either a skull and prepare it for a full year, filling it with necromantic ingredients, pacts, symbols, and words of power, unknown to many, even sacrificial seals, as well as that were linked to enemies that were vampiric in nature. They contain everything from protection and now elder seals of grand reflection and much more. So I thought of myself as a form of lightning rod, a conduit for what I'd be gathering to be channeled through myself at first. The changes were small but started to build up. And just think about this. I've done this since 2013 for years in every state I've lived in, crafting this necromantic sinkhole, not only to prolong my life, but to allow me to use these protections to augment and change pieces of myself. Think of it as you're laying pieces of your mortal self to the grave for rites of undeath. I would seal these within the walls of crypts and within powerful graves. I would burrow deep and use cement so it would never be removed. The cement would also have aligned ingredients mixed in that deals with aspects of permanency, so the rites could never be undone. So I began lacing them with traps and poisons for everyone who worked against me. They would essentially be bound within them the moment they struck, and feeding my aspects until I eventually harvested them, using what they are as a means of transfiguration, using the spirits of the dead as well as your enemies for your foundation, feeding on negativity and their curses. You wouldn't believe the hundreds of people who have fallen for this over the years, especially since 2013. And I made it known that I had an illness. And when people kept cursing it, I had a conduit buried with a deceased ancestor. They marked the veve into the foundation of my blood. I took it further by calling Lord Matragal and the spirit Zazazel. Now, most people fall for this trap mechanism and step into my domain if they can't see, and eventually they're consumed by it. But for you, brother, I don't want you to try and copy this method, because everyone who has that I've told it about has ended up with disastrous results. It's merely something within my lineage that I'm able to use. So each of us has this domain of protection, of invulnerability, only we can use. It's unique. So what I want you to take away from this is get creative with your protections. Allow them to do the work. Awaken them like I have. Make them sentient. Weave them, make them alive so that they're able to undo any form of binding. An offensive defense sends not only the message that I'm protected, but as a rising god, you must have the will to punish those for their transgressions against you. Make it subtle. Make it sacrificial. And best of all, brother, make it hurt. So I'll see you again next time for our next private lecture.